Blood was still drying under Vincent Romano's fingernails when he saw her. The room was full of Chicago's deadliest criminals, pretending to be corporate elites, but all he cared about was Clara. She wore a crimson dress that hugged every curve, completely unaware she had just become a cartel's target. The Chicago wind howled off Lake Michigan, rattling the reinforced glass of the Apex Global Logistics headquarters. Inside his corner office, Vincent Romano poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. He did not bother to wash his hands. The rust-colored stains around his cuticles were a testament to the afternoon he had spent in a soundproof shipping container down at the South Side docks. A rival lieutenant from the O'Bannon crew had tried to skim from the Romano Syndicate's weapons shipments. Vincent had corrected the error personally, but his mind was not on the violence. It was on the glowing tablet on his mahogany desk. The screen displayed a personnel file for Clara Jenkins. To the rest of the floor, Clara was just a mid-level forensic accountant. She was a quiet, plus-sized woman who buried her generous curves under oversized wool sweaters and shapeless gray slacks. The corporate sharks at Apex ignored her, dismissing her because she did not fit their manufactured razor-thin aesthetic. They thought she was slow. They thought she was soft. Vincent knew better. 3 weeks ago, the Romano Syndicate had been hours away from a coordinated raid by the feds. $30 million of unlaundered cash was sitting exposed in dummy accounts. Then, miraculously, the money vanished. It was fragmented and routed through a dozen offshore shell corporations, completely erasing the paper trail before settling safely back into Vincent's primary holding company. His top tech guys could not trace the architect of the transfer. It took Vincent 2 weeks of relentless digging to find the digital footprint. It belonged to Clara. She had not stolen a dime. She had merely observed the flaw in their network, recognized the incoming federal threat, and fixed it. A puzzle solved in the dark. She possessed a terrifying, beautiful intellect, and ever since he discovered her secret, Vincent had been consumed by a dark, possessing obsession. He watched her on the security feeds. He memorized the way she bit her lower lip when she was decrypting files. He noted the hidden resilience in her eyes when the arrogant executives barked orders at her. She was a lioness hiding among sheep, and she had no idea the wolf was already at her door. Across town, in a cramped apartment in Logan Square, Clara stared at herself in a full-length mirror. She took a shaky breath, smoothing her hands down the sides of the dress. It was crimson, deep, unapologetic, blood red. She had bought it on a whim months ago, telling herself she would never have the courage to wear it. The fabric was unforgivingly tight, clinging to her thick thighs, the swell of her hips, her soft stomach, and plunging just enough to showcase her heavy breasts. For years, Clara had weaponized her wardrobe to make herself invisible. The logistics industry was brutal, and being a curvy woman meant navigating a minefield of predatory men and vicious women. Invisibility was armor, but tonight was the annual Apex Global Holiday Gala at the Palmer House Hilton. Clara was tired of hiding. She was tired of letting men, who were half as smart as her, dictate her worth. She knew exactly what Apex really was. She knew her employer, Vincent Romano, was the head of the most ruthless mafia syndicate in the Midwest. She knew she had saved his empire 3 weeks ago, even if he did not know it was her. Tonight, she wanted to feel the power she held in secret. She slipped on a pair of black heels, applied a dark red lipstick, and grabbed her coat. She was stepping out of the shadows, completely unaware that the apex predator of Chicago was already waiting for her in the light. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House was a monument to gilded excess. Enormous crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the crowd. A live jazz quartet played in the corner, the smooth saxophone failing to mask the predatory tension in the room. This was a corporate party in name only. Half the men in bespoke tuxedos were carrying concealed firearms. Half the women, dripping in diamonds, were wives and daughters of made men. When Clara handed her coat to the attendant and stepped into the ballroom, the shift in the atmosphere was immediate. The crimson dress was a siren song. It pulled eyes from every corner of the room. Women who usually looked right through her now paused, their eyes narrowing in a mix of jealousy and confusion. Men who had never given her a second glance stopped mid-sentence, their gazes dropping to the heavy, luscious curves the tight dress put on display. Clara kept her chin high, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. She walked toward the bar, forcing herself to project a calm, unbothered aura. She ordered a bourbon. Neat. Well, well. Look who decided to finally show up to work. Clara did not have to turn around to recognize the slurred, arrogant voice of Leo Gallagher. Leo was the director of shipping operations, a notoriously corrupt manager who had spent the last 2 years taking credit for Clara's audits. He stepped into her personal space, smelling heavily of gin and expensive cigars. His eyes roamed up and down her body, lacking any shred of subtlety. "I have to admit, Clara, I didn't think you had it in you," Leo sneered, leaning closer. "Usually you look like you're wrapped in a moving blanket. But this is a lot of woman, almost too much for one dress to hold." He reached out, his clammy hand grabbing her waist, his thumb pressing into the soft flesh of her hip. Clara did not flinch. She did not shrink. She turned her head, her eyes locking onto his with a cold, deadpan stare. "Remove your hand, Leo, before you lose it." Leo laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Tough talk from the back office, girl. You put on a red dress and suddenly think you run the place? You're still just a fat little accountant who does my paperwork." He tightened his grip, trying to pull her against his chest. "Why don't we go upstairs? I've got a suite." The temperature in the ballroom seemed to drop 20 degrees. The jazz music did not stop, but the ambient chatter within a 50-foot radius suddenly died. Clara saw the blood drain from Leo's face before she even realized someone was standing behind her. The pressure on her hip vanished as Leo violently recoiled, stumbling backward into a cocktail table. Vincent Romano stepped into her peripheral vision. He was dressed in a flawless charcoal suit, his broad shoulders blocking out the light of the chandeliers. His dark eyes were fixed on Leo, completely devoid of humanity. It was the look of a man deciding exactly how to dispose of a corpse. "Mr. Gallagher," Vincent said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated in Clara's chest. "It seems you have forgotten your place. Or perhaps you have simply forgotten how to breathe." Leo was trembling, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "Mr. Romano, I was just joking with Clara. We work together. We're friends." "You are not her friend," Vincent stated, stepping closer. The sheer dominance radiating from him made the hair on the back of Clara's neck stand up. "And you will never speak to her, look at her, or breathe the same air as her ever again. If I see you on the same floor as her, I will take your eyes. If you touch her again, I will strip the flesh from your bones while you watch. Now, get out of my sight." Leo practically tripped over himself, fleeing the ballroom. Vincent turned his attention to Clara. The cold, murderous void in his eyes vanished, replaced by a dark, searing heat that made Clara's breath hitch. He looked at the red dress. He looked at the way her chest heaved. He looked at the defiant fire still burning in her eyes. He did not see a woman who needed saving. He saw a queen. Without a word, Vincent shrugged off his charcoal suit jacket. He stepped into her space, his chest brushing her arm, and draped the heavy, warm fabric over her shoulders. The jacket smelled of rich cedar, expensive cologne, and the faint metallic tang of gun oil. It engulfed her, hiding the crimson dress from the staring eyes of the room. It was a physical claiming, a massive neon sign to the entire Chicago underworld that she belonged to him. "You look breathtaking," Vincent murmured, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "But I do not share, and there are far too many unworthy men in this room staring at what is mine." Clara's pulse skyrocketed, but her sharp mind refused to short-circuit. She looked up at him, gripping the lapels of his jacket. "I didn't ask for your protection, Mr. Romano. I had Leo exactly where I wanted him." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Vincent's face. "I know you did, Clara. I know exactly what you are capable of. $30 million rewrote it in under 6 minutes. You saved my empire. Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" Clara's stomach dropped. He knew. Before she could respond, a deafening crash shattered the elegance of the ballroom. The heavy oak doors at the east entrance were kicked open. 3 men in tactical gear, armed with suppressed automatic weapons, spilled into the room. The O'Bannon crew. They had not come to skim shipments today. They had come to cut off the head of the snake. Screams erupted as the first volley of gunfire shattered the chandeliers, raining glass down on the panicked crowd. Vincent's hand shot out, grabbing Clara's waist with an iron grip, pulling her down behind the heavy marble slab of the bar. He drew a custom Sig Sauer from his shoulder holster, his body shielding hers completely. "Stay down," Vincent commanded, his voice perfectly level despite the chaos exploding around them. "I will clear a path to the main lobby." "No," Clara said sharply. Vincent looked at her, surprised by the absolute lack of panic in her voice. Clara's mind was moving at 1,000 miles an hour. She was no longer just an accountant. She was a tactician. She had read the Palmer House blueprints during a security audit. "The main lobby is a choke point. If they breach the east doors, they have snipers covering the front exit. We'll be walking into a slaughterhouse." Vincent fired 2 shots over the bar, dropping one of the O'Bannon hitters. "Then what is the play, Clara?" "The kitchen service corridor," she said, crawling toward the end of the bar, pulling his jacket tighter around her shoulders. "It leads to a freight elevator that runs on an independent electrical grid. It's blind to the security cameras, and I know the override code. We take it down to the sub-basement, cut through the steam tunnels, and we're out on Wabash Avenue before they even finish sweeping this floor." Vincent stared at her, the gunfire raging around them. She was soft, curvy, and wearing a ridiculous red dress, yet she was calculating an escape route with the cold precision of a seasoned Mafia lieutenant. The obsession in his chest locked into something permanent, something fatal. "Lead the way," Vincent said, slamming a fresh magazine into his gun. "I am right behind you." Clara took a deep breath, clutching the oversized jacket, and moved into the smoke. The catering kitchen of the Palmer House was a scene of absolute pandemonium. Waitstaff and chefs scrambled for the exits, slipping on dropped trays of caviar and shattered champagne flutes as the muffled cracks of gunfire echoed from the ballroom. Clara did not hesitate. She wove through the stainless steel prep stations with surprising agility, clutching the lapels of Vincent Romano's oversized suit jacket to keep it from slipping off her shoulders. Vincent covered her 6, his weapon raised, his eyes scanning every shadow. He moved with the terrifying, fluid grace of an apex predator in his element. securing their flank while letting Clara dictate their path. She led them past the walk-in freezers to a heavy steel door marked for maintenance personnel only. Clara grabbed the handle, rattling it. Locked. A keypad glowed dull red beside the frame. "Step aside," Vincent ordered, raising the muzzle of his Sig Sauer to blow the electronic lock. "No, wait," Clara snapped, stepping between him and the door. "A gunshot will echo down the service shafts and tell them exactly where we are. Give me 3 seconds." She dropped to one knee, ignoring the grime on the floor and the way the tight crimson dress dug into her thighs. Her fingers flew over the keypad. She had memorized the Palmer House administrative defaults when auditing their vendor logs last year. She punched in a 6-digit code. The keypad beeped, turning green, and the heavy door clicked open. Vincent stared at her, a muscle feathering in his jaw. Every second he spent with this woman, his obsession deepened. She was not just surviving. She was outmaneuvering professional killers with nothing but her intellect. They slipped into the dim, concrete corridor, the heavy steel door shutting and plunging them into near silence. The air here was stale and smelled of industrial cleaner. Clara kicked off her black heels, leaving them by the door. She needed speed, and the smooth soles were a liability. "The freight elevator is at the end of this hall," Clara whispered, her bare feet padding softly against the cold concrete. They moved swiftly. When they reached the grated doors of the freight elevator, Clara hit the call button. The ancient machinery groaned to life, the cables rattling in the shaft above. Vincent stepped close behind her, his chest brushing her back. The adrenaline was pounding through her veins, but the heat radiating from him was a different kind of danger altogether. He reached out, his large, rough hand gripping her waist, pulling her flush against him. "You are full of surprises, Clara," Vincent murmured, his voice a low rumble in the quiet corridor. A corporate accountant who knows the blind spots of a century-old hotel and handles a cartel hit squad without shedding a tear. "Who exactly are you working for?" "I work for you, Mr. Romano," Clara replied, turning her head slightly to meet his gaze. "Or at least I did, until your enemies decided to crash the company party." The freight elevator arrived with a heavy metallic clank. Vincent pulled open the grate, ushering her inside. He hit the button for the sub-basement. As the cage descended, the ambient light flickered, casting sharp shadows across Vincent's face. He looked down at her, taking in the sight of her barefoot, disheveled, wrapped in his jacket with the crimson silk of her dress peeking through. "You saved my money," Vincent stated, no longer asking a question. "You found the federal wiretap, you created a dozen phantom shell companies, and you washed $30 million without leaving a single fingerprint on the servers. My best hackers spent days trying to figure out who outsmarted them." "I was doing my job," Clara said, keeping her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "Apex Global pays me to find discrepancies. I found a massive one. It just happened to belong to the Mafia." Vincent chuckled, a dark, dangerous sound. "You are not a regular employee, Clara. You are a genius hiding in plain sight." "Why do you hide?" Clara looked away, pulling the jacket tighter. "Because women who look like me are not taken seriously in boardrooms, Vincent. We are either punchlines or invisible. I chose invisible. It is safer." "Not anymore," Vincent said softly, reaching out to tilt her chin up, forcing her to look at him. "You will never be invisible again, and no one will ever dare treat you as a punchline. You belong to the Romano Syndicate now. You belong to me." Before Clara could process the absolute possessiveness in his declaration, the elevator ground to a violent halt. The doors groaned open to the sub-basement. This level was a labyrinth of exposed pipes, hissing steam valves, and massive brick archways. The heat was stifling. Clara stepped out, leading the way toward the eastern utility tunnels that fed into the city's main grid. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the heavy boiler machinery ahead. Two men stepped into the dim light. They wore the tactical vests of the O'Bannon crew. They had anticipated a subterranean escape route. "Drop the weapon, Romano," the lead hitter barked, leveling an automatic rifle at Vincent's chest. Vincent did not blink. He shoved Clara hard to the right, pushing her behind a massive iron steam pipe, and fired twice in the same breath. The first hitter dropped, a bullet catching him in the throat, but the second man was already returning fire. Sparks showered the air as bullets ricocheted off the iron pipes, deafening in the enclosed space. Vincent dove behind a concrete pillar, pinned down by the suppressing fire. Clara crouched behind the steam pipe, her hands covering her ears. The shooter was advancing slowly, keeping his weapon trained on Vincent's position. Clara looked around frantically. She saw a heavy iron valve wheel on the pipe directly above the shooter's path. She did not think, she acted. Clara stood up, stepping out of cover just enough to expose her position. "Hey!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. The shooter whipped around, startled by the sudden appearance of a woman in a red dress. It was only a split-second distraction, but it was all Vincent needed. He stepped out from the pillar and put a bullet clean between the man's eyes. The silence that followed was heavy and ringing. Vincent lowered his weapon, his chest heaving, his dark eyes locking onto Clara. She was shaking now, the reality of what she had just done crashing over her. Vincent crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He grabbed her shoulders, pulling her fiercely against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her perfume mixed with the smoke of gunpowder. "You foolish, beautiful woman," Vincent breathed, his voice rough with an emotion he had not felt in years. "Never do that again. Do you hear me? You do not risk your life for mine." "I had to do something," Clara whispered into his shirt, her hands gripping the fabric of his vest. Vincent pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. He cupped her face, his thumbs wiping a streak of soot from her cheek. "We are leaving. Now." They navigated the rest of the steam tunnels in silence, the heavy iron grates eventually giving way to a rusted service door. Vincent kicked it open, and the freezing, biting wind of the Chicago winter hit them instantly. They emerged in a dark alley off Wabash Avenue. A heavy, armored black Cadillac Escalade was already waiting at the curb, its engine purring. The driver, a broad-shouldered enforcer named Dominic, stepped out and opened the rear door. "Get her inside, boss," Dominic said, his eyes scanning the rooftops. "The O'Bannon crew is heavily entrenched at the hotel, but the police are already swarming the perimeter." Vincent guided Clara into the cavernous back seat of the SUV and climbed in beside her. "Drive," Vincent ordered. "Take us to the River North penthouse." The ride to River North was a blur of neon city lights reflecting off the bulletproof glass of the Cadillac. Clara sat rigidly in the plush leather seat, Vincent's jacket still wrapped around her like a heavy shield. She stared at the rain beginning to streak down the window, her mind finally catching up to the sheer insanity of the last hour. She was sitting next to the head of the Romano syndicate, fleeing a mass shooting orchestrated by a rival mafia family. Vincent poured a glass of amber liquid from a hidden compartment in the armrest and pressed it into her hand. "Drink," he commanded softly. "It will help with the shock." Clara downed the whiskey in one gulp, the burn grounding her shattered nerves. They pulled into the underground garage of a sleek, high-rise luxury building. Dominic escorted them to a private elevator that required retinal scanning to operate. The doors opened directly into a sprawling, two-story penthouse overlooking the dark, churning waters of the Chicago River. The space was an architectural masterpiece of exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, and minimalist luxury, completely isolated from the chaos of the city below. Vincent shed his shoulder holster, tossing it onto a glass coffee table. He walked over to a massive stone fireplace and flicked a switch, igniting a roaring gas fire. Clara stood awkwardly near the center of the room. The warmth of the fire slowly thawed the chill from her bones. She shrugged off Vincent's heavy suit jacket, letting it drape over the back of a leather sofa. Without the jacket, she was fully exposed again in the tight crimson dress, her bare feet planted on the expensive Persian rug. Vincent turned around and stopped. The firelight played across her curves, highlighting the deep red silk that clung to her heavy hips and full breasts. His dark eyes devoured her, tracing every line of her body with unapologetic hunger. For years, Clara would have crossed her arms, shrunk into herself, and tried to hide her body from a gaze that intense. But tonight, she had outsmarted a cartel, hacked a security door, and saved a mafia boss. She did not feel the need to hide anymore. She stood tall, letting him look. "You are staring, Mr. Romano," Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady. Vincent closed the distance between them slowly, moving like a predator, savoring the final moments of a hunt. "I am looking at the woman who holds my life in her hands," he murmured. "And please, call me Vincent." He stopped mere inches from her. Clara had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "What happens now, Vincent?" Clara asked. "The O'Bannons know you survived. They know I was with you. I cannot go back to my apartment. I cannot go back to a cubicle at Apex Global." "You will never see a cubicle again," Vincent promised, raising a hand to lightly trace the curve of her jawline. "Tomorrow, my lieutenants will wage a war that will erase the O'Bannon name from this city. By midnight, there will not be a single rival breathing in Chicago. As for you, Clara, you are staying here. With me." Clara's breath hitched as his thumb brushed over her lower lip. "As a prisoner?" Vincent let out a low, rough laugh, stepping closer until his chest pressed against hers. "As my equal. As my partner. You have the sharpest mind I have ever encountered. You see the world in variables and solutions. You understand the architecture of power better than men who have spent their entire lives in this syndicate." He slid his hands down her waist, his large palms resting heavily on her hips, pulling her flush against his solid frame. The heat between them was explosive, a dangerous cocktail of adrenaline, survival, and deep, primal attraction. "But it is not just your mind that I am obsessed with," Vincent confessed, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "When I saw you walk into that ballroom tonight in this dress, I wanted to burn the building down just to stop the other men from looking at you. You are magnificent, Clara. Every soft inch of you drives me out of my mind." Clara felt a profound, aching heat bloom in her chest. No man had ever spoken to her like this. No man had ever looked past her weight to see the dangerous, brilliant woman underneath, let alone worshipped the very curves she had spent her life despising. She reached up, her hands tangling in the collar of his ruined dress shirt. "You are a monster, Vincent," she whispered, stating a simple fact. "You are a ruthless, violent man." "I am," Vincent agreed without hesitation, his dark eyes burning into hers. "I am the devil of Chicago. But I will burn this entire city to ash before I let anyone touch a single hair on your head. You are mine, Clara. Say it." Clara looked at the ruthless Mafia boss, feeling the immense, terrifying power he wielded. But she also felt her own power. She was the one who controlled his ledgers. She was the one who had navigated them out of a slaughterhouse. She was not a victim in his dark world. She was the missing piece to his empire. She pulled his face down to hers. "I am yours," she breathed against his lips. Vincent groaned, capturing her mouth in a bruising, desperate kiss. It was acclaiming, fierce and possessive, sweeping away the last remnants of the quiet, invisible accountant she used to be. Clara kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands gripping his broad shoulders, anchoring herself to the storm. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city of Chicago sprawled out in the darkness, completely unaware that a new queen had just taken her throne. Clara Jenkins had worn a red dress to a corporate party, and by morning she would be running the deadliest syndicate in the Midwest alongside the devil himself. Thank you so much for joining me on this thrilling journey through the dark and dangerous world of the Romano Syndicate. If this gripping mafia romance kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and share this video with your fellow story lovers. Leave a comment below telling me your favorite part of Clara and Vincent's escape. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more high-stakes, breathless storytelling every single week.